Once Again is funded in part by Union Bank and Trust in support of history programming on Nebraska Public Media. Family-owned for 60 years, UBT and its people are invested in the success of families, businesses, and communities. Member FDIC.
And you look out the window and you can take it all in.
The guy sitting next to me on my train trip to Chicago had been riding Amtrak all year because he is a candidate for President of the United States.
And they give me access to the public. Like, I met you, like, hey, Mr. Kelly, I'm a presidential candidate, talk to me, you know. Let me surprise you for a minute. Let's have a conversation.
And it was a real surprise, a good one, to meet write-in candidate Andre McNeil from St. Louis. It's a perfect example of the types of surprises that have always made traveling by a train a great adventure in America.
It also give you time to see America.
Cross-country rail travel originated from Omaha when the Transcontinental Railroad connected in 1869. The state of Nebraska always played a big part in traveling by train.
The flashing flyer of stainless steel following the trail of the Iron Horse to mark a new era of transportation.
Through the 40s and 50s, Union Pacific made it sound so glamorous.
Live it up on the UP luxury train.
I've got to admit, I'm among the people who love the idea of traveling by train. But America came to rely on the convenience of our cars and the speed of the airlines. By 1970, with the railroads going broke, train travel became the business of the government.
Assurance that the nation's passenger trains, which had all but died, would still have a vital role in American transportation. Amtrak.
And today, well, once again, there's fresh demand to hop back on board. More people are buying tickets. But political winds have shifted, and federal money for passenger trains in America could vanish entirely. So I'm on board the once famous California Zephyr because it's a good time to ask, why did passenger rail service fall out of favor in the first place? This is Once Again, a podcast from Nebraska Public Media about the stuff of history that's shaping the news today. I'm Bill Kelly, your host and researcher, and on this episode, you and I are taking the train to Chicago.
Pacific, a matchless travel thrill on the Vista Dome, California Zephyr.
Train 337, Amtrak, now 40, track 9.
Overnight, the California Zephyr chugged across western Nebraska, making stops at McCook and Holdridge and Hastings before it glided into Lincoln. It's right on time at an exhausting 3:30 in the morning. I decided that if I was going to talk about trains, I should take the train. Inside the Amtrak depot downtown, there are half a dozen fellow passengers waiting to get on board. The conductor gave a little briefing and handed out seating assignments.
So I've got you second rear car of the train, seat 53.
On board, a dim blue light fills the coach car. Pairs of reclining seats line the aisle. It's very quiet. Most passengers doze. Some curl up under blankets they brought knowing that the coach car would be their bedroom for the night. My seatmate is the presidential candidate, Andre McNeil.
Do you have any idea how many hours or how many miles you have been on the train?
Don't have a clue.
He's been crisscrossing the country using a rail pass that allows him to go where he wants to reach voters.
It took 2 rail passes, so I spent about a total of almost $1,000.
Pretty much your whole campaign budget.
Yeah, my whole campaign budget, really.
We're going to hear more from Andre about his travels later. For now, the engineer picks it up to about 75 miles an hour. The only sound is the rush of air and the clacking tracks outside. We're heading up to Omaha to pick up some more sleepy passengers. Omaha's been the headquarters of the Union Pacific Railroad since 1862, and that's the company that all but invented cross-country rail travel in America.
Anyone getting on at Omaha finds the Amtrak station to be a pretty bare-bones box of a building.
Compare that to the 1920s. Omaha had become one of the 12 largest railroad centers in the United States. To accommodate the passengers, 2 huge depot buildings appeared. Burlington Station stood right next door to Union Station. Once, 7 different railroads converged here. By 1946, 10,000 passengers passed through Union Station every day. Around 5 a.m., we leave Omaha with a handful of groggy ticket holders and cross the river into Council Bluffs, Iowa. The Union Pacific Museum is here. I paid a visit to better understand what's changed over the years, since the whole system nearly disappeared in America in the 1970s. There's a great section devoted to passenger rail. A rail history buff showed me around.
Okay, I'm Dave Seidel, and I'm a volunteer at the Union Pacific Museum.
Dave's interest in trains runs deep and goes way back.
I was born and raised a half a block away from the Union Pacific Main Line in Sidney, Nebraska. It was virtually in my backyard all the time. And you always wondered who was on that train, why are they traveling?
The museum highlights 100 years of riding the rails in America. When Union Pacific helped build the Transcontinental Railroad, a ticket made it possible to head west to California. Nothing fancy.
It was just another commodity that you shifted. In the early years, you had 1 or 2 trains that were named trains, that were first-class accommodations that catered to the wealthy and the business, and they were very luxurious. But most of the passenger trains were basically
boxes on wheels.
Yeah, boxes on wheels.
The train was easier and faster than a horse-drawn stagecoach, so customers willingly put up with the discomfort.
But it wasn't until the 1930s, 1920s, 1930s, that the railroad really got interested in introducing luxury.
As America recovered from the Great Depression in the 1930s, trains had to compete with new technology, cars and buses.
The locomotive, the M10,000, was built entirely of aluminum, which was extremely lightweight, of course.
And very modern for the time.
And very modernistic.
Diesel-powered engines replaced steam. All railroads understood speed had become as important as comfort.
But the industry which pushed a frontier into the Pacific showed once again its courage and vision. For suddenly appeared a silvery streak. Built like a bullet on the principle of the new science of streamlining, it caught on and was sold out for run after run.
All of a sudden, you gain hours between Chicago and LA. And again, a faster train makes it more attractive to the traveling public.
The flashing flyer of stainless steel following the trail of the Iron Horse to mark a new era of transportation.
One of the UP's new generation locomotives clocked speeds of 120 miles an hour across western Nebraska. Americans loved the idea of traveling by train, and so did Hollywood. It seemed like the movies were free advertising for train travel. It was fun, it was romantic. Maybe you've seen White Christmas.
I'll soon be there with snow. I wash my hair with snow.
Trains on film were mysterious, like during a chance meeting arranged for Strangers on a Train by Alfred Hitchcock.
Each one has murdered a total stranger. Like, you do my murder, I do yours.
We're coming into my station.
This had a lure of mystique. The first-class passenger train, the Streamliners, the Zephyrs, the Chiefs, they were very awe-inspiring because you had to be very special. You had to have some money to ride those trains, but when you did, you were treated like royalty.
Florida Limited leaving on track 1 for Washington, Charleston, Savannah, Jacksonville, and Miami. All aboard, all aboard.
The biggest thing the UP did was, of course, the Dome car.
Passengers of the Vista Domes are enthralled by the constant procession of scenic delights.
Special lounge cars with huge curved windows made travel through the mountains worth the price of any train ticket.
Then, with breath-catching suddenness, the Continental Divide swings into view.
their particular dome cars had more square footage of glass in the dome than any other dome car. So therefore, you had a larger viewing area to look out.
The special glass is glare resistant, and efficient air conditioning keeps the temperature just right. Sunshine may be enjoyed.
What are we looking at over here?
Well, this is a 1950s version of the passenger service. This particular display shows what a coach car would be.
Dave showed me how seats on long-distance trains were as wide as anything you would find in the first-class compartment on today's airlines.
A coach seat is always the lowest fare on a train.
These were the cheap seats?
These were the cheap seats, right. This was always the lowest fare of the train.
Anyone who gets on a plane today would die for a seat that looks like this.
There's no comparison. There's absolutely no comparison. The West Coast trains, you're talking literally 30 to 40 hours that you're on a train. So you had to be comfortable. And if you weren't comfortable, guess what? You didn't ride the train.
California Zephyr bedrooms are easily and quickly converted from comfortable daytime lounging compartments to restful sleeping rooms.
The first-class passenger, of course, got the better lounge cars.
There's a cool replica of a dining car in the museum. Table settings laid out on white linen that would not be out of place on a luxury cruise ship. Fine china, forks and knives for each course. Silver-plated serving dishes.
He chooses his own time to dine and his own menu, such as this Union Pacific specialty, charcoal broiled sirloin steak.
Every steak that was ever served on the Union Pacific train came out of the Omaha stockyards, and you were given a luscious steak.
Here friends may meet to share the pleasures of a transcontinental trip and appreciate the refinements that make the California Zephyr the quietest, smoothest, easiest riding train ever built.
Theoretically, they never made a dime off the dining car services because of the tremendous amount of cost involved.
Now it's time we get a reality check. All that history, movie stars, the fancy steaks, attentive waiters, it's all fog, obscuring the reality that hauling passengers was a money-losing proposition for the railroads.
No. There's, most of the times, a passenger train, you were lucky if you broke even.
Most major railroads divided their business into two specialties, passenger, freight. Two different cargoes that happened to share a set of tracks. The freight trains, shipping lumber and refrigerators and coal and potatoes all over the country, made tons of money for the railroads. Huge demand. The passenger trains earned their biggest profits in 1944, over $1 billion. But that was the last time. I was shocked to learn the number of people riding the train had been dropping almost every year since, get this, 1920. Cars and airplanes became the more convenient and cheaper travel choices in America.
The traveling public now is all of a sudden looking at, well, maybe I'll take the car on a long-distance trip because now the roads are better, the cars are better, and they have more freedom to go wherever they want to go.
The federal government spent billions to make it easier to drive. Tax dollars helped pave the cross-country interstate highway system. The government spent billions to make it easier to fly. In the 1950s, local airports got up to half of their construction costs covered by U.S. government tax dollars. On top of that, in 1967, the post office stopped using passenger trains to carry mail cross-country. That cost companies like Union Pacific millions. The surviving railroads could no longer afford to prop up their passenger operations with the profits from hauling freight. One government report considered the industry to be a lost cause and predicted the passenger rail coach car, quote, may take its place in the Transportation Museum along with the stagecoach. And here I stood in a museum looking at the Union Pacific coach car on display along with Dave Seidel, the volunteer historian.
On the Union Pacific, from day one, they had a passenger train. Now all of a sudden on May 1st, there was no passenger trains.
It all changed on May 1st, 1970. Union Pacific and a dozen or so surviving American railroads sold off their passenger trains to the federal government, creating what we call Amtrak today. The coast-to-coast train, known as the City of Los Angeles, became the last privately owned train to cross Nebraska. Dave remembers that day, going out to the railroad station in Sidney, Nebraska, watching the last train come and go.
The last train that went through was the eastbound train right at sunset. And eventually it went over the crest of the landscape and it disappeared. And then all of a sudden it was like, that's it. There'll be no more. It was a very sad day.
The California Zephyr still travels coast to coast. Let's get back on board.
Where are the breakfast sandwiches? Those are right over here at bottle number 2.
About 8 hours after I got on the train in Lincoln, Nebraska, we crossed the Mississippi River into Illinois.
The train is peaceful, serene. It gives you time to reflect.
It's lunchtime, and my new friend Andre McNeil, presidential candidate, woke up from a nap in the club car thinking about why he likes to take the train, even if it's not always the easiest way to get home.
It lets you see America. It lets you say, look at all this grassland in Illinois, or look at the Mississippi River, or you see the world and it gives you a time to say, I stay in a beautiful country and I'm glad I'm a part of it.
Chicago.
A rail historian argued a few years ago that passenger rail ended in competitive irrelevance and virtual extinction of the service. Passenger service in America is not extinct, far from it. It's still not profitable either, probably never will be. But how did that era of glamorous train travel give way to an era of gritty survival? When I get to Chicago, we'll find out how Amtrak managed to bring train travel back from the dead. And why can't America get those cool Japanese bullet trains?
Once Again is funded in part by the John C. and Catherine S. Angle Charitable Trust in support of history programming on Nebraska Public Media.
Good news, Amtrak's eastbound California Zephyr is running ahead of schedule today.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next stop coming up in about 5 minutes will be Ottumwa, Iowa.
At each stop in Iowa and Illinois, a few passengers grab their luggage and climb off, passing people ready to climb on.
We arrive at the station. These are normally quick stops, folks, so once again, you'll want to be downstairs, ready to go.
It's a pretty diverse group. Amish farmers, college kids, Asian tourists. Adam from California grabs a cup of coffee in the cafe. He's been on the train since it departed San Francisco Bay.
I think like 51 or 52 hours.
Okay. He's heading back to the bicycle store he runs in Chicago, bringing his own bike on board with him.
I can just ride to the station and park it, be on the train, take the bike and get off and go.
Niall, a 20-something tech worker, got on in Des Moines, heading to a business meeting in Chicago.
It's like $60. That's pretty good. Can't beat that.
He's focused on his laptop and coffee. The countryside passes by in a blur.
I work online, so can actually get stuff done. It feels productive. It's pretty. Today's a beautiful day.
These ticket holders, Adam, Niall, along with those farmers and tourists, represent the range of customers Amtrak hoped to hold on to from day one, when America's passenger rail network moved from private to public ownership in 1970. We get to Chicago a little ahead of schedule and disembark into one of the great rail stations in America, Union Station in the heart of downtown. I walk through the magnificent main hall and find the regional headquarters for Amtrak. That's where I met Mark Magliari.
I'm the Amtrak spokesman based in Chicago. My name is Mark with a C. Amtrak is not spelled with one.
Why isn't Amtrak spelled with a C?
I wasn't here in 1970 and 71, but I'm sure that there's a reason.
He was open to talking about how government policy choices made 50 years ago shaped the service we have today.
The freight railroads were paying taxes. The freight railroads were under an obligation when they were built to carry people, whether it made money or not.
After decades of losing money on the passenger business side of their operations, America's railroads wanted out completely.
There were railroad bankruptcies across the country, largely here in the Midwest and certainly in the East, and they wanted relief. They wanted to transfer the obligation to carry people to somebody else.
Union Pacific, the Burlington, Santa Fe, and the other major rail carriers needed to focus on the more lucrative freight business.
And the freight railroads went to Congress and said, look, you're making us carry people after taxing us to build our competition. Whether it's the aviation network or whether it's the road network, we've built our competition and you're controlling our prices and you are killing us.
It took years of negotiating and maneuvering, but eventually Congress decided passenger trains were an essential service and deserved taxpayer support. Amtrak made the case in this promotional film.
Assurance that the nation's passenger trains, which had all but died, would still have a vital role in American transportation. The act created a wholly new corporation to run the nation's passenger trains, Amtrak.
They went to Congress and said, we will have this new company called Amtrak today operate on our tracks, and we will charge them a minimal fee to use the tracks. But that's the deal they made. And it enabled them to become, in some cases, immensely profitable.
It now seems possible that this long-neglected form of transportation can provide an alternative to the pressures of travel.
The railroads turned over their trains to Amtrak. Congress coughed up enough money to set up the new government-managed National Rail Service. While keeping a small army of jingle writers employed, Amtrak went about creating a new brand, positioning passenger rail as an affordable alternative to highway and air travel.
More and more smart executives are going places on an Amtrak train.
Reacquainting America to the joys of cross-country family travel. A decade of happy, shiny commercials didn't match the ugly reality of Amtrak's dismal financial picture. In 1971, Congress gave Amtrak a $40 million startup grant for just 2 years. 10 years later, the government subsidies swelled to over $930 million. One Midwestern member of Congress declared Amtrak had been a noble experiment which the country could not afford just because some politicians wanted a toy railroad. By the 1980s, faced with growing budget deficits, President Reagan issued what the Chicago Tribune called a death threat for Amtrak.
I think it's time for us to admit we don't know how to run a railroad.
Reagan even pitched selling off the railroad to private investors. A majority of Congress rejected that idea, with foreign oil shortages and high gas prices still on the minds of voters. It was good politics and policy to keep Amtrak around as an alternative to highways and airports.
And then Congress said, well, wait a minute, people want options. We need more trains. And they finally started funding Amtrak in a way that we could replace all the rail cars that we inherited and the locomotives that we were given and started building this network.
By the 90s and early 2000s, Amtrak began a comeback. New money improved trains and tracks. Demand for the high-speed line serving big cities along the East Coast boosted ticket sales. Even after COVID wrecked travel, passengers returned and are now reaching record levels all over the country. But there are a couple of pieces of Amtrak's origin story, tricky policy choices that haunt the rail carrier to this day. One, of course, is the decision to maintain government subsidies, and I'll get to that in a little bit. The other literally determined who owned the tracks. Honestly, I'm not sure how many people realize this. Amtrak may own the rail car you ride in, but it does not own the tracks you ride on. Here's the history behind that fact. You already know the railroads were going bankrupt. Get rid of the passenger trains. Keep the freight trains. Understandably, they wanted to keep control of over 150,000 miles of track that they'd already paid for.
In exchange for that, we were given the right to use their tracks.
By we, Mark Magliari means Amtrak. The permission to use the track is obviously different from owning the track.
And over time, we were given preference in law, if not always in practice, over freight trains. So we were the first real deregulation of the railroad network.
There was no way tax money was going to be spent to lay an entirely new, efficient, expensive network of tracks just for Amtrak. That means sometimes the boxcar trains get in the way of the people trains.
So it's a huge challenge for us. It hurts us. It hurts our brand image. It hurts repeat ridership. And our employees have to deal with it.
There's still a perception that Amtrak has a bad on-time record.
We're not happy with it. We are not satisfied with our on-time performance. Look, as nice as the crew would be on your train, as great as the apple pie would be, as clean as the windows would be, if we didn't get you there when we said we were going to get you there, we are going to disappoint you. And we are disappointing too many people too often.
How bad is it? Well, delays caused by freight trains are the number one reason Amtrak runs behind schedule. It's gotten better recently, but as of 2024, most of the scheduled passenger trains do not meet federal standards for on-time performance. Hoping to put some teeth in the rules, the U.S. Department of Transportation even went to court suing one of the freight railroads for holding up passenger trains too frequently. The point is, back in 1970, that decision to have freight companies hold sole ownership of most of the track is one of the root causes of the biggest passenger headache. Then there's that very political decision to keep Amtrak alive with government subsidies. But before tackling that, I'm going to make my way back through Union Station. The California Zephyr is scheduled to head back west in a bit. It will be another chance for me to talk with passengers about what they think Amtrak needs and what they'd like to see for its future. And I'll finally get to those cool bullet trains.
Once Again is funded in part by Union Bank and Trust in support of history programming on Nebraska Public Media. Family-owned for 60 years, UBT and its people are invested in the success of families, businesses, and communities. Member FDIC.
It's mid-afternoon, and it's time to catch a ride back west on the California Zephyr. Looking around, it's notable that Chicago's Union Station is busy, not packed, but bustling with people getting on and off their trains.
I'm going to Lincoln.
One more car.
One more car. Thank you, ma'am.
But these people are a tiny fraction of the total number of people traveling in America at this moment. Trains only pick up about 1% of the long-distance passenger miles traveled in the U.S. A huge percentage of Americans drive their cars across the country. And air travel? Across town, Chicago's O'Hare Airport handles over 70 million passengers every year. 70 million compared to the 3 million Amtrak passengers passing through Union Station.
Yes, ma'am.
I took this trip hoping to figure out how the history of the trains in America shaped the railroad service we have today. I'll be the first to admit it's way too simplistic to boil it down to two main points, but here goes. The first one was who owns the track, and we covered that one already. The other are the federal government subsidies. There are also some states that supply funds for their big city commuter trains. They pitch in because modern rail passenger service hasn't made money for a very, very long time, like since the 1940s. It's been almost impossible. With that in mind, I'm on the westbound Zephyr riding back to Nebraska.
Welcome aboard, California Zephyr.
We left Union Station at 2 in the afternoon, right on schedule. It helps to understand why there are government subsidies if you get an idea of who relies on rail travel. There are those who need it because they can't drive or fly. The Amish, those afraid of flying, the people on a limited budget. Here's my new friend Andre McNeil, the presidential candidate.
Well, you do it with what resources you have, and right now Amtrak is a reliable resource.
Andre switched trains back in Chicago, heading to St. Louis so he could be back home in time for Election Day.
Amtrak offered me the opportunity to experience the history of my country.
Which, if you're running for president, is a pretty good thing to reflect on.
Right.
As the farms of southern Illinois rush by, you find plenty of recreational travelers in the Vistadome car. Better off financially, it's almost like taking a cruise for them. Anthony from Texas, traveling cross country with his partner.
Did some research and found out this was like one of the most scenic kind of routes you could do on Amtrak.
Jim and Joan, a retired couple from Virginia, bought an Amtrak National Parks package.
The whole trip is an excursion. The whole trip is memory making, as opposed to just getting on a plane and going out.
Generally, these were satisfied customers.
There have been some recent improvements that
Martha Easter Wells, a frequent rider and dues-paying member of the Railroad Passengers Association.
But whether all that will happen will depend upon whether there's funding.
Ah, the funding. That brings us back to the other relic of history that impacts rail travel in America every single day. Remember what we learned about Amtrak's reason for existing? The government started running and subsidizing the railroads because the railroads themselves could not make them profitable. As a result, one decade to the next, funding for Amtrak mirrors how political leaders feel about government spending for public service. So I'm talking to you early in 2025. The pendulum swings in Amtrak support during this century have been pretty dramatic. Here's then President Joe Biden.
I believe that the best days for Amtrak and for rail and for America are ahead. I really believe that.
In the past couple of years, Biden threw a bunch of money into transportation infrastructure.
It includes the largest investment in passenger rail since Amtrak was created 50 years ago. $66 billion for world-class rail right here at home.
That was a big change from President Donald Trump's first term in the White House. He proposed cutting Amtrak funding by half, with the long-distance rail lines serving rural areas singled out as a problem. Pro-rail members of Congress consistently make sure Amtrak avoids the most dramatic cuts. When we record this in 2025, we're still waiting to hear how Amtrak fits in with the new push towards historic federal budget cuts. In the past, the debate swings between subsidies or no subsidies. There's almost no discussion these days about how to make Amtrak profitable. There is a lot of talk about how to make train travel more desirable. Here's Adam, the bike store owner who made the round trip to California.
I had dinner with some people that grew up riding trains all over the world, and they called Amtrak, quote, primitive.
A lot of people ask, why can't American trains be as elegant as in Europe or as bullet train fast as in Japan? To get some perspective on that, I called up a guy who's ridden lots of trains all over the world.
Hello, jet setters and rail fans. I'm Jeb Brooks from greenergrass.com. Right now, I'm in Chicago. It's time to head over to San Francisco, and I'm traveling on board the most scenic train in the United States. This is the California Zephyr.
On YouTube, millions of people watch videos produced by Jeb Brooks, featuring high-end travel tips in the air, on cruise ships, and trains.
I have been accused of overselling Amtrak. It is not all peaches and cream.
When Jeb took the California Zephyr, it wasn't his most glamorous excursion and a far cry from his first-class rail accommodations he enjoyed crossing Canada, Europe, or Australia.
But I think you have to look through that and acknowledge Amtrak for what it is, and it's an adventure. You know, we can't promise we're going to get you there on time. We can't promise you're going to have the most delicious food you've ever had in your life, but we can promise an adventure. And that's what I love about Amtrak.
Jeb also experienced something several of our rail travelers have longed for, taking a trip on the high-speed bullet train of Japan. This is a clip from that video.
Another thing the Shinkansen is known for is punctuality. In 2022, the average delay per train on this route was only 1.1 minute. Can you imagine that in the United States?
He's clearly enamored by racing across Japan at 175 miles an hour.
Previously, the only true high-speed service I've experienced is Amtrak's Acela service in the Northeast United States, which can be quite jerky and loud. The Shinkansen experience is totally different. It really just feels like you're zooming from one place to another effortlessly, almost like you're flying.
Jeb would love to see fancier, high-end rail travel in America, but he also zeroed in on a fundamental truth. From the beginning, the real mission of this nation's railroads has not been luxury, it's utility.
It exists really, at the end of the day, to provide public transportation to otherwise rural or underserved communities. And so the motivation to elevate the luxury first class element of it is not there. It's just not it's not its purpose.
The Amtrak guy did not dispute Jeb's point.
The mode has a certain amount of romance and majesty to it. And we play to some of that nostalgia. But nostalgia doesn't sell as many tickets as reliability and schedule and fare.
To that end, Amtrak continues to expand its network. A new line between Chicago and Minneapolis became an instant hit. A new line may link Dallas, Houston, and Fort Worth. Meanwhile, ticket sales in 2024 set an all-time record. I want to take you back to the Union Pacific Museum. I'm passing by while heading back to Nebraska on the Zephyr. During my visit with amateur historian Dave Seidel, we talked about balancing luxury and utility. That idea that a train is just a utility, it's true, but there's more. The nostalgia and the romance I keep hearing about. It's that hard-to-describe sensation that brought Dave, the little boy in Sidney, Nebraska, down to the rail station whenever the City of Los Angeles line pulled into town.
It was very romantic because we'd see streamliners like this, and they're most impressive. And you always wondered who was on that train, why are they traveling, that it was this mysterious intrigue of these people that got to be so lucky to travel on these luxurious trains.
You could see them through the windows.
See them through the windows. Once in a while they'd wave at you, and people would be in the diner eating breakfast, and you'd think, well, those lucky guys, they get to eat breakfast. And it was a very romantic situation.
Union Pacific, City of Los Angeles. Relax on the dome line. Eat good in the dome line. Have fun on the City of Los Angeles. Live it up on the UP luxury train.
You have been listening to Once Again, our exploration of history that's shaping the news today. It's a copyrighted production of Nebraska Public Media. If you like what you heard, leave us a review where you found us. It's produced and researched and hosted by Bill Kelly. That's me. Co-producer Emily Kreutz is the lead audio engineer and mixed this episode with the assistance of Jared Stutzman. Jeff Smith provided studio production. Editorial review is handled by news director Jay Omar and Chris Husted with the Midwest Newsroom. Stu Nicholson provided content advice. Special thanks to the Union Pacific Museum and its curator, Patricia LaBounty, for providing some of the great archival audio. Thanks to the crew of Amtrak's California Zephyr and the Midwest Regional Office. On our webpage, there's a list of books, documents, and other resources we use to research passenger rail, along with some photos you might find interesting. That's at nebraskapublicmedia.org/onceagain. And while you're there, we want to hear from you, what you like, what you didn't, and future topics on Once Again.
Bend an ear and listen to my version of a really solid Tennessee excursion. Pardon me, boy, is that the Chattanooga choo-choo? Yes, yes, track 29. Boy, you can give me a shine.
Once Again is funded in part by the John C. and Catherine S. Angle Charitable Trust in support of history programming on Nebraska Public Media.
You leave the Pennsylvania station about 3:45. Read a magazine and then you're in Baltimore.
Dinner in the diner.